Hey y'all, my name is Taylor. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. So today's video I'm going to be discussing my top 10 books of 2024. And this is one of my absolute favorite videos to make because I love looking back at the whole year and seeing what I read. Some of the books, especially at the beginning of the year, I was like, really? I read that this year? Don't really remember. It feels like way longer than that, but here we are. Thank you Goodreads and Storygraph for keeping track of that for me. But yeah, I came up with 10 books that I rated 4.5 and 5 stars. And I love these books to pieces. So, I'm thankful that I ended up with 10 because that's the number I rated, the 4.5 and 5 stars. So that was pretty easy. I just had to categorize them or number them based on how much I enjoyed them. So I'm pretty confident with the list order that I came up with. As I said, some of these I read the beginning of 2024 and the memory is struggling. So if they're not as in-depth or as accurate, or, you can look back at my Goodreads. All of these have Goodreads and Storygraph reviews. So just letting you know that. But without further ado, let's start off at number 10. That one I have The Smeralda Flower by J.F. Rogers. I think that's the author's name, going off of memory here because I forgot to write down the author's names, but I will have everything linked in the description box. I rated it 4.5 stars. I really super enjoyed it. It packs a very strong entertainment value punch for being such a short book. It's only a couple hundred pages, if that. So I read it within a couple of hours. And it feels very much like a fairy tale or a folk tale story, written a long time ago, like Grimm's level, back then, but the author came up with it all on her own. But it is about a young woman who is hired by this mysterious man to go to his estate and paint this flower that he has there. And when she meets him, it gives very much the it's kind of a mashup of Phantom of the Opera and Beauty and the Beast, because she meets him in his castle. He's kind of all alone. He only has a couple of servants, and he's very mysterious. He wears a mask. He hardly shows up. She's like, "You brought me here to paint this flower. Where's the flower?" And he's like, "All in good time," So you learn more about him and his backstory and why he is the way he is, and a romance brews. So it is actually Christian fiction, or more specifically, I think you could possibly categorize it as Catholic fiction, because this is set in the real world in the 1500s. It doesn't have any magical components to it, but it just kind of has that feel, if that makes any sense. So it's set in the 1500s in Italy, and pretty sure it's Italy, France, somewhere. A European country. Again, the memory gone. But it's the 1500s. And yeah, so it's historical Christian romance. Number 9, I have Mind Games by Nancy Mail. I rated this 4.5 stars. This is a Christian romantic suspense novel. It is the first book in the Kaylee Quinn series. By the way, I guess I technically had more that I rated 4.5 and 5 stars, but I did not include the whole of a series. I think there's 3 series on here that I finished, and all of them were so good. So in order for me to not have to talk about the entire series, just consider I highly recommend the entire series unless I say otherwise. So yes, so this is a trilogy, and all of them I rated very, very high. I really enjoyed the series. But so what it is the first book in the Kaylee Quinn series, and Kaylee Quinn is a very unique individual. She reminded me a lot of Sherlock Holmes, because she has a very blunt nature. She just tells it like it is. She's kind of a social recluse type of thing. She's odd because she uses this profiling technique of, she imagines the killer across from her eating dinner, and that's how she solves who the FBI is looking for. She's a FBI profiler, and her methods are unorthodox. So she, in this one, In this one, she is targeted by a serial killer that sends out this poem that ultimately it says, you know, these people are going to die this way, and then at the end, I'm going to get you, Kaylee Quinn. So she is also the daughter of a serial killer herself, so she has that background and that emotional influence of that. So she's dealing with that. So it's very in depth. And very deep, I should say. And there is a romance as well between a new partner who comes up. And so I really, really enjoyed it. You know, Nancy Mal is very, very good at being dark without being too dark, if that makes sense. Like, it's like the Christian version of dark, where she does make it feel real. And, you know, there's bad things in this world, but she doesn't go into super duper detail. But if you are very cautious about that kind of thing and you're not really into true crime, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for you, but otherwise it is a very good pick. Coming in at number 8, I have a classic, and that is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I actually buddy read this with Elma from Elma's Book Journey, so I will link her channel below. If you aren't subscribed to her, definitely go check her out and give her a sub. But this was actually a reread for me, and it was really fun to read it with Elma because she'd never read it before. And this I'd read a long time ago. I don't think I'd read it as an adult. But I had loved the Megan Follows TV series. Yeah, the movies, they're not TV series, I don't think. The movies. And I love it. I really want to buy it, but it's like $50 for American, and I'm like, that's a lot. But anyways, this, if you don't know, which I'd be very surprised if you don't, is about a young orphan girl who is accidentally adopted by a elderly group of siblings to help them on the farm, and she is just a unique individual. She is another character that just says whatever comes out of her mouth. She is definitely a child that has a very unique and imaginative brain. She just says things in such an interesting, sometimes funny way, and she doesn't mean to be. So it's her story, and she's just one of those characters that is timeless because she's so lovable. So if you haven't read Anne, you need to. Okay, so it's later in the day. Mom life. We film when we can. So, starting where I left off, in number 7, I am putting The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I rated it 5 stars. I was really surprised by it, actually. I was thinking that, you know, it was written back in the day, so I was expecting like harder English, eloquent terms, hard to follow, that type of thing. But it was actually really easy to read and very, very atmospheric. I highly recommend you read it in October, around that time frame, because it just felt like fall in a book. So what it's about, it's a Sherlock Holmes story, and you don't have to read the Sherlock Holmes books in order. This is the first one I've ever read, and I was fine. The story is about Sherlock and Watson, of course, and they are contacted by this man who has inherited, I think it's Baskerville Hall. I'm not entirely sure. He's inherited an estate, and the predecessor was found dead in the yard with this giant dog footprints around him, and there's this legend that the family is being killed by this Hound of the Baskervilles. And so there's no clear reason why this guy died, and so the guy who's inheriting it asks Sherlock to investigate, and so the mystery solving ensues. So there's lots of scenes of the English moors and fog, and you know, it has a little bit slightly of a feeling of supernatural. It's not really supernatural, but you know, that legend and that fear that instills in people, that is the feeling you get from it. So highly recommend that one for fall. Number 6, I have Hope Between the Pages by Pepper Basham. I buddy read this with Tammy over at the Protagonist Pub. I always love buddy reads. They just make reading the book so much better. But This one I also rated 5 stars. This is a dual timeline story. The historical timeline is set during the 1900s at Biltmore Estate, which is in Asheville, North Carolina. It's super close to where I live, so I was fangirling the whole time about the Biltmore stuff in this book. But think like Downton Abbey type time frame. And then then there's a modern day timeline. So the historical timeline is about a young woman who works in the Biltmore Library as a book maiden. Isn't that such a cute title? I would love to be a book maiden. So anyways, she takes care of the library and basically is like a librarian but has a cooler title. And she gets books for the guests there, and she happens to have a spark with one of the guests. I'll leave it at that. And then the future timeline is the descendant of the historical timeline, and she is trying to save her family's bookstore and is discovering family history along the way, and there's a romance for her as well. So yeah, this book had so many great quotes. Like, I'm not usually a person that wants to capture quotes, just mainly because of time, but they don't super jump out at me all the time. But this one was filled to the brim with excellent quotes that one day, whenever I have the time, I'm going to go back through and highlight and put them in my little quote book that I hope to start one day. But yeah, so this is a very sweet romance. It is part of a series, Doors to the Past, but they're by different authors, so you don't have to read them in order or anything. I haven't read any of the other books, I don't think. It's not coming to mind, but yeah, it's pretty much considered a standalone. Coming in at number 5 is Ari Audrey and the Legend of the Fire Rose by Christy A. Cole. And if you didn't already know, Christy is one of our fellow Christian booktubers, and she is one of my very good friends here on BookTube. She is a fellow co-host, one of them, for the Once Upon a February Readathon, so I love her. But this is her debut novel, and she did such an excellent job with it. I was very pleasantly surprised. I mean, I knew she was probably pretty good, but I was blown away by how good this story was. And also, can we appreciate the cover? I love this cover. She did an excellent job hiring the person that did this. And the story itself is great. So this book is about Ari Audrey, and she is a young woman. This is YA, secular YA. And she is living in a boarding school. The story opens with her and her parents running from this beast, and her parents are trying to seek sanctuary. She ends up escaping and does make it to the sanctuary, which ends up being the boarding school, and she kind of grows up from there. And so she's taking classes and with other young women, learning about survival and gardening and how to be a lady, but also, like I said, the fighting aspect of it. So it's a really cool boarding school. And meanwhile, eventually, more evil creatures start appearing, and people start disappearing. So she goes out and helps hunt the creatures down, things like that. And she comes across this fire rose. And I don't want to say anymore. It's kind of getting into spoilers, but it was a very engaging storyline. And she's going to be, I think she's currently writing book 2, so I'm really looking forward to that. I also did my first ever author interview with her, so if I can remember, I'll try and link that below in case you're interested, because I learned a lot more, and I think I appreciated the book even more talking to Christy about her inspiration and the different things surrounding this book that you can only get from the author. So highly recommend if you are interested in a clean YA fantasy story. If you like Ella Enchanted, I personally felt like there were similar vibes to this, just because the boarding school aspect and like the magicalness side of it. I don't know, it may just be me, but that's what I felt like. Coming in at number 4 is A Forest of Stolen Memories by Callie Thomas, and this one was such a pleasant surprise to me as well. I had bought it a long time ago, and it had sat on my shelves, and I finally got around to it, and I'm so glad I did because I loved it. And it is book 1 of a duology, and I also loved book 2, but for sake of the video, I'm going to talk about book 1, but know that I also recommend book 2 very, very much. So this one is a fairy tale retelling, or maybe I should say a reimagining, because it's not a straight fairy tale retelling. It's very much its own story. It has elements of a fairy tale story in it. But it is about Rose, and she has lost all of her memory. She doesn't know her name. She doesn't know where she's at, why she's there, nothing. But she figures out that she is apparently getting married to this guy, and she just has a wrong feeling about him. So she escapes from the marriage that is about to ensue, and she flees to an enchanted forest and meets a tall, dark, handsome stranger and begs him to help her escape this guy. And he agrees, and they venture into the enchanted forest, where it's basically forbidden. Nobody goes in there. Nobody knows what's in there, and they have a journey of her figuring out who she is, all the things, getting her memory back, and it's a love story between her and the guy. So, yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was, it just grabbed me. I will say, if you are sensitive to intimacy descriptions, it is secular, but it is also clean in the sense that there's no explicit content, but it is a little bit more descriptive about kissy type scenes that I typically read. It didn't bother me personally. I think it's because it's the fairy tale aspect of it. I don't know. And maybe it's because I enjoyed the story so much, but if it had been like a contemporary romance, it would have been too much for me. But the story, I think it was fine for me personally. So I just want to let you know that in case you are cautious with that type of thing, that it is present in this one and in book 2. Probably more so in book 2, which is a Little Mermaid retelling. So, number 3 is For a Lifetime by Gabriel Meyer. This is book 3 in the Timeless series. I think that if you are even remotely connected to Christian BookTube, you will have at least heard of this series, if not have read one of them. So you do have to read them in order if you didn't already know. The Timeless series is about young women. They're all related to each other. Each book, the women are related to each other somehow. But they all are born with a time-crossing gene, meaning that they are born in 2 or more lives, and they live each life simultaneously, and they have to pick which life they want to stay in for the rest of their life by a certain age. Very, very unique premise, and Gabriel Meyer does such a fantastic job weaving in history and having such a unique storyline, keeping you engaged, but also having phenomenal faith elements. Every book, she has a different faith message in it, and it's just very hard-hitting, and yeah, it's just excellent. It's just a step above the rest. Yeah, they're just superb books. But this particular one is about a set of identical twins, and they are living in the Salem witch trials and the early 1900s during the early flight period. One sister is kind of more quiet. She kind of takes care of everybody. And then the other sister is her opposite, basically. She's very vibrant. She is very impulsive, thrill-seeking. She flies airplanes when, this was a very new thing and you could die from it. So she likes to live on the edge, I guess. But yeah, so it is their story of figuring out themselves, who they are in relation to God, and which life are they going to choose, what happens in their lives. It's just such a unique, interesting story. Number 2 is Recorder by Kathy McCrum. This is a Christian sci-fi with romance in there too. This is book 1 of the Children of the Consortium series. I did finish the entire trilogy this year. Highly recommend the whole series. I'm just going to talk about book 1 again. This one is very, very unique. Our people who have read it have described it as sci-fi with heart, and that is very much the case because it is less on the science fiction-y part of it, the technical terms, the science part of it, and it's more about human relationships. So It is about Recorder, and she is part of a society where she has to record what is going on in the most unemotional way. In order for her to do that, she has some technology embedded in her brain that kind of punishes her if she starts to have an emotional reaction to something. She has this drone that follows her around, and that's what punishes her, basically. So she is sent on this secret mission to, I think it's like a moon or asteroid, I can't really quite remember, but there's an accident and she loses that technology in her head. It's damaged, irreparably damaged. And so she has to come to terms with what that means. She's lived her whole childhood like that. So she's figuring out humanity, what it means to be human, the different things that humans do, society, social norms that she just doesn't understand. And so she's figuring all that out, and she ends up having found family, and the side characters in this are phenomenal. They are very, very well developed, and they really come to care for Recorder, and so it's just, I love that part of it. There's also a romance in here, and the guy is just great. He's a good guy. So I love seeing their romance bloom. There's high stakes in here. There's action. It's so good, and I highly recommend the audiobook, by the way. But yeah, this was so good. One of my favorite series of all time. My top favorite book of 2024 is Fierce Heart by Tara Grace. And this book, let me tell you, I ate it up. I rated, actually, the core series is made up of 6 books. And then there's some companion novels with stories about side characters and that. Haven't gotten to the companion novels yet, but I did read the 6 main books. And then there's also a spin-off series that I don't know much about yet. I haven't looked into it yet, but I am going to read it at some point. But I rated books 1 through 5, all of them 5 stars. Book 6, I rated 4 stars. It was really good. I still enjoyed it, but it just wasn't quite the same as the other 5. But the entire series is so good. I loved it. It is my favorite fantasy series of all time at the current moment. So I will tell you what it's about, and then I'll fangirl some more. So it is about a marriage of convenience between a human princess and a elf prince, and they have to marry because their peoples are on the brink of war, and so it is definitely a marriage of convenience. And there are magical gifts in here. The elves have certain powers that are just gifted to them from birth, and they're just able to use them. It's not like witchcraft type of magic. It's more magical abilities. And his ability, his name's Farendel. I should have said that. Essie and Farendel are our main couple. But Farendel, he is the strongest elf warrior of his entire nation. He has just unparalleled power, and he has a reputation for being a lethal warrior. He can take out entire armies just by himself. So that sounds pretty intimidating, marrying that dude that can do that. But she is up for the challenge, and she actually suggested the marriage alliance. And Essie is a very bubbly, unique character. She just has such great love for her family and her country, and she is determined to at least have a good marriage of friendship, at least. So they fall in love, as you might can guess, but they fight threats together, and yeah, it's definitely romance, but also there's some action scenes and the magical aspect of it. I really, really recommend this book and the entire series, really. I mean, I just binged the whole series, had such a great time. That it is, if I didn't already say, it is clean, secular fiction. I'm pretty sure Tara Grace is a Christian, not entirely sure, but It is super, super duper clean. I think their first kiss is like book 2 or 3 or something. I can't really remember. And they don't go further than that until later, and it's more of an emotional fade to black versus a descriptive, physical descriptive fade to black, if that makes sense. So yeah, it is so good. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 books of 2024. Let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts were on them. Let me know what your favorite book or books, if you want, were for 2024. Let me know if you're interested in any of these. I would love to fangirl about them with you. Let me know your thoughts, and thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day. Bye.